Hello again, this is Jack Sheffield, Jack the Exam Guy, the instructor for your roofing exam course. The first thing that I like to do after explaining to you about the exam itself and the course itself is to talk about these manuals, to get an overview of these manuals. This alone will go a long way towards making you successful on this exam because the first step is knowing what book to go to, knowing what manual, the type of information that is in each manual. Okay, so that's our first step. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about. It's not always necessary to have the latest edition as well. Okay, let me get my pointer out so I can point these out to you. Okay, so it's not always necessary to have the latest edition. All right, and so if you've got an older code book, one or two editions older, or if you've got an older Walker's or an older roofing construction estimating NRCA manuals, they reproduce these manuals every few years, and they don't really need to. It's just a way to make money, in my opinion, for them. So don't fret if you have don't have the latest edition. This information doesn't change, and sometimes the test questions are based on the old manuals, and then they may change the new manuals, and you'd actually might be better off using the old manuals. If that sounds crazy, it might be a little crazy, but that's just the way it is. So don't worry about it if you don't have the latest manual. Okay. Once again, this presentation is just an overview. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about each manual. There's going to be subsequent videos which take you through step by step, page by page, each one of these manuals, what's important to know, what's not important to know, and I think you'll be illuminated. Okay, so here they all are, all in one place. So let's just make sure you've got them all. This is the Walker's Building Estimators Reference Book. This is the 31st edition. Now I'm recording this in July of 2023. So there is a 32nd edition out, and I will try to have those page numbers for you in case you're using the 32nd edition. But if you're using the 31st, that's fine. If you're using another edition, a different edition, then like I said, the information stays the same. You're just going to have to search a little bit in the manual. Okay, so that's the Walkers. Now the Walkers is an estimating book. Here's the OSHA manual. Okay, I'll talk a little bit more in detail about that in a minute. Architectural sheet metal book, your roofing, construction, and estimating. This is actually not the latest edition I'm showing you there, so if yours looks a little bit different, just make sure that it's by Daniel Atchison. All right, Florida Building Code Building. Right, that's like I said, you don't have to have the 2020 edition. If you're already using the 2023, that's okay too. If you got a 2017, not a big deal. Test protocols, Florida Building Code, test protocols for high velocity hurricane zones. All right, and then you have all your NRCA manuals. You have membrane roof systems. So this is what traditionally we always called flat roofs, but they're not really flat anymore. They don't, you got to put some type of slope on them, a little bit of a slope to get the water to move off the roof. But, traditionally we always called them flat roofs. We have, we have the, goodness gracious, I can't even see that. The printing is so small. That red one is the 2020 is the metal panel and SPF roof systems, and I believe the 2023 is out. So if you're using that one, then that's fine too. But that is the metal panel and SPF. And then the green one, the 2021, is your steep slope. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. All of these actually. And then we have this one that you're looking at is the 2018 architectural metal flashing and condensation and air control. Now, this one is updated now. The 2022, I believe, is the one that's out, and you may have that if you have the latest edition. If you don't have the latest edition, it's no big deal. And I will have the page numbers for you on the latest edition as well. And then we have the waterproofing manual. So these are all NRCA, National Roofing Contractor Association manuals, and we're going to be talking about those in more detail here in just a minute. As you go through these manuals, by the way, keep in mind that you know, your National Roofing Contractors Association is an association which wants people and roofers to do things very, very well, not to a minimum standard. Okay, so when you're keep that in mind when you're getting information about NRCA, because you may go to building code and you say, wow, that's not very stringent. It doesn't agree with what NRCA says. Well, the reason it doesn't is because NRCA wants you to do something a little bit better than your average roofer who's doing stuff at a minimum standard. Okay, so let's just look at them individually now. We're looking at the Florida Building Code building here. This is the Mac Daddy of the building code books. Regardless of what trade you're taking, you're going to see there's lots and lots of chapters, takes you through everything, all the code. You're not going to need to know all the code for the roofing. Okay, so you may want to put these chapters in the beginning, because what's going on with this code book is when you have to flip all the way to the back to get to the index, or all the way to the back to get to chapter 33 here. That might be a problem. It's because those binders sometimes they don't meet in the middle, and flipping all the way through, you know, just takes an extra minute or two, and an extra minute or two could make a difference. Okay, so with building code, you're going to look for words, questions that use the term minimum or maximum, or it must be a some way, it shall be a some way. Shall is very important, you know, for building code questions. It does have a good index. Once again, I would place that in the very front of the binder along with some of these other chapters. Chapter 1, they could ask you about the permitting process, you know. They could ask you about the inspection process. They could ask you about what's, you know, some exemptions to Florida Building Code and so forth. So it may not be exactly specifically about roofing. So keep that in mind, and I want you to make sure that you listen to those videos very carefully, take those practice exams seriously when they talk about scope and administration. All right, roof assemblies, all right, and rooftop structures. That's chapter 15. They talk about all the different types of roof coverings. They talk about all the flashings and what the minimum lap on the flashing is, and the minimum, thickness of your flashing and so forth. And then they also talk about the decks. Okay, what type of deck do you have to have under particular roof coverings? It's going to change depending on your roof covering, and then there are some minimums that might surprise you. Okay. The chapter 23 is all about wood. Well, guess what? You're going to have some wood decks out there, right? You're going to be using wood structural panels. Okay, what is that? That's just a fancy word for plywood, or OSB. Well, there's a certain way you have to attach them. There are minimum ways, and you may be surprised at how minimum it does get. Probably you're not going to build things to minimum building code, because, and I want to caution you with this, minimum building code is not the way most people build stuff in Florida, because most of your building is going on the coast, where it is at least a windborne debris region or a high velocity hurricane zone. Well, they're not going to let you build a roof according to minimum code. Believe it or not, minimum code, you can put 4 nails in a shingle. Okay, according to minimum Florida building code. And they may let you do that someplace like way in the middle of the state, up north or something, but of course you're not going to do that on the coast. So keep that in mind. Don't just think that, 6 nails is a minimum, how many nails you put in a shingle and so forth. It's going to get way more complicated than that, obviously. All right. So keep that in mind. These manuals don't always necessarily agree with each other, and that's one of the tricky things about the roofing exam, is the manuals don't necessarily agree, because you got minimum building code, and then you've got NRCA that really wants you to build things a little bit better than minimum building code, or maybe a lot better than minimum building code. Okay, so encroachments, chapter 32, encroachments into the public right-of-way, like awnings, okay? As a roofer, you might be asked to build an awning. Well, you got to know if it's going over a public right-of-way, like a sidewalk, there is a minimum distance that has to be above the above the sidewalk, okay? And then you got your frame, and then you actually have your canvas that can drop below the frame. So, keep that in mind. You might have to have a question about that. And then, as always with every trade, safeguards during construction, okay? How do you store your materials? How far away do you have to store your materials from an intersection? 20 feet, it says, okay? These are things that you're going to have to look up. And then you've got pedestrian walkways. Okay, let's say that you're working on a roof. It's a commercial structure. Something might fall off the roof, and you have to build a pedestrian walkway to keep the pedestrians safe. And there's some rules about that. So all these things I want you to be aware of that are in the Florida Building Code. And once again, this is just an overview. We're going to go page by page. Okay, so let's take a look at the next manual, which is the test protocols for high velocity hurricane zones. I want you to be familiar with these terms, RAS and TAS. Whenever you hear the term RAS and TAS, we're probably talking about the high velocity hurricane zones. It could be in the code book in the roofing chapter, but more than likely it's in the test protocols for high velocity hurricane zones. This is all about code for Florida, okay? What is an RAS? An RAS is a roofing application standard. What does that mean? Well, all that means is this is the way you got to put it on, okay? This is a shingle. This is how you got to put it on. This is a clay tile. This is how you got to put it on. This is a, TPO or whatever. There is a roofing application standard, and they are all in this manual. And then you have something called a testing application standard. Well, what is that? Well, this is the standard that the manufacturer has to use when they're testing the material. Okay, it's got to withstand this, that, and the other. This, how much water, this much wind, yada yada yada. When they're actually testing it, trying to get product approval. So RAS, TAS, you're thinking test protocols for high velocity hurricane zones. Not a big deal. Just go to the book. We're going to take you through page by page and show you exactly what we're talking about. Now, this one has no index. This is one of the few code books that doesn't have an index. But the thing is, it's got a great table of contents. It lists every single RAS and every single TAS in that first couple of pages, and it'll get you right where you need to be. That's all you got to know. That's what you got to know first of all. RAS and TAS means high velocity hurricane zone. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, well, here you go. We got the OSHA book. We probably know a little bit about the OSHA book by this time in our lives. There are many different versions. So what I do is I call out paragraph numbers, not page numbers, because the paragraph numbers change very little from one year to the next, from one version to the next. It's the page numbers that change. So I won't be calling out page numbers. I'll be calling out paragraph numbers when I'm showing you which ones I think are important to highlight. There is no need to have the latest version. Once again, just like all the other manuals, it's obviously about safety. You get your question about safety, 9 times out of 10, you're going to think OSHA manual. It's got a good index. You go to the index, look for the keyword, obviously, and answer it and go on to the next question. Generally aren't that complicated. We've got ladders. It's going to be questions about scaffolding, motor vehicles, first aid kits, just all kind of stuff about safety. Now, here's the thing. There is a chance that you're going to get questions, that you can't find the keyword in the index. Okay, so it's not a bad idea to get familiar with the table of contents. If you can't get to where you need to be from the index, but you still feel like it comes from the OSHA manual, then I want you to realize, and I kind of want you to kind of get familiar with the table of contents, and remember and notice that each section, what they call a subpart, which in the real world we'd probably call a chapter, but they don't call it a chapter because it's a legal document, so it is a subpart. So they have each aspect of construction has its own little subpart. Okay, so you have subpart X, which is ladders. Subpart L is scaffolding. Subpart P is excavations. You're not going to have to worry about excavations. Subpart D is occupational controls. So There's one for motor vehicles and so on and so forth. So just keep that in mind in case the index doesn't get you there. You can use your table of contents. Okay, now this is the 31st edition that I'm showing you here of the Walker's Building Estimators reference list. Reference book is what it actually is. But so this is an estimator's book. It's an estimator. What does that mean? Okay, if they ask you about how many nails it's going to take, how many shingles it's going to take, how long it's going to take, what's your labor going to be, how many hours it's going to take, you're estimating with this book. Okay, so and the chapter is actually called Thermal and Moisture Protection. It's not called roofing. So if you can't find it in the index and you're flipping through this book trying to figure out where something is, the chapter, which is chapter 7, is thermal and moisture protection. Well, with roofing, believe it or not, you're going to be expected to know more than just about roofing. You're going to be expected to know about waterproofing as well. It all comes under the same umbrella. Okay? Good index. It's got a good index. So if you get a question about estimating how much it's going to be, how much do you need, so on and so forth, you're going to think the Walker's Building Estimators reference book, even though there's another book that you might want to use as well. But this is one you need to be familiar with. And one of the main things is on page 788 in the 31st edition, or page 472 in the 32nd edition. And it's the same one in all the editions. So if you've got some other edition, don't worry about it. You're just going to have to look up in the index and find it. But they've got a diagram of a roof, and then they show you how to figure out your area if it was flat. But we know that most roofs aren't flat, so there is a table which has a flat area factor in it. Based on the slope, you multiply your flat area that you calculated by this conversion number, and it gives you the actual area based on the slope. So that'll be explained more in detail on subsequent videos. Okay, and then we're going to go to our architectural sheet metal manual. Boy, these SMACNA people, they know how to do it. This is you're going to look at the way they're telling you in this book to do stuff, and you're going to go, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And they do things in a much higher level of competency than what you're going to see on most jobs. They really are proud of their sheet metal work. So, and not only that, but you're going to need to know about gutters and downspouts and rainfall and all this kind of stuff, that's in this book. It's way above what I think most people do on a regular basis, but it's on the exam, so we got to know it. This is the Sheet Metal Association Contractors of North America. So we're talking about flashing. All right, they're talking about gutters and downspouts, metal roofs, coping. All right, they're going to tell you all about coping and the joints for coping and stuff like that. We have step flashing. There's a discussion of step flashing, gravel stop, and this book does not have an index, so that's kind of a problem. I hate when books do not have indexes, so you're just going to have to get used to it. Hopefully your book is tabbed. If not, tab it yourself. Make sure those tabs are permanent. If you got a tab, if you can take it off without ripping the page, you may have to take them all off on the exam. So anyway, I got a video which takes you page by page, basically, through the architectural sheet metal book. And roofing construction estimate. This is the one that I want you to focus on when you don't know what else to do. You go here first. It's got a good index. It'll get you where you need to be, and you'll find it here if it's there. Okay, it's got a wide variety of roofing concepts. It takes you through the whole dadgum, gamut of decks and flashing and coverings and waterproofing, and just everything imaginable is covered in the roofing construction estimating. So, and the good thing is it has that excellent index. So if it's about roofing at all, go here first, look in the index, get to the page, see if you can find it. If not, then start thinking, okay, where else is it going to be? Go to the NRCA manual, go to the architectural sheet metal, whatever the appropriate one is. This one does do some estimating as well, so an estimating question could be in this book or it could be in the Walkers. Okay, just wanted to run that one by you. This is a very important one. Once again, go here first if in doubt. All right, so now we've got all these NRCAs. I've got them all up here for you just to keep things simple here. Okay, so to the first one, membrane roof systems. This is what we traditionally think of as flat roofs. Okay, so once again, like I said before, we're going to put a little bit of slope using the insulation usually on these flat roofs, so they're not technically flat, but they're not steep either. They're not any, which is kind of an interesting concept, which really surprised me when I first took this exam. You see this one, this 2021 is steep slope. Okay, this one is membrane roofing. They used to call this low slope. Okay, and then the 2020, and then the other one was steep slope. Low slope versus steep slope. Now it's membrane roof system versus steep slope. Okay, so what are we talking about there? If you're out on a job site and you're on a 312, you're definitely not going to say a 312 is steep slope, right? Well, according to NRCA, it is, because anything that's not basically a flat roof is a steep roof. So if it's shingles and it's designed to shed water, guess what? It's steep slope, even if it's a 312, even if it's a 212. Okay, because of the design to shed water is the way they call it a steep slope. So keep that in mind when we're talking and when on the exam when they talk about steep slope. I know I was actually a roofer for a little while, and I know that we don't call them steep until they get to 712 or 812 or more. I can hardly get on a 612 right now anymore, but keep in mind that according to NRCA, anything that is a shingle or anything designed to shed water, they consider steep slope. But back to membrane roof systems, the 2019 or whatever version you have, it's all pretty much the same information. What you got to realize is they go back and they talk about your asphalt. You may never have been on a job where they did asphalt. Back in the day, you used to see, the little kettles behind trucks all the time, but you don't see that anymore because very few people do the built-up roofs. But guess what? They don't care on the exam. They're going to ask you about all the different types of asphalt, the different types of coal tar pitch, the temperatures you got to apply them, and everything else. They act like you go out there and do it every day. Of course, these roofs are now done by TPO, EPDM, and these types of products, which are also covered in this manual as well. Okay, but what you have to realize, especially with your steep slope, your low slope roofs, your membrane systems, is your deck and your insulation and your roof covering are all part of the system. And so you're going to get a lot of questions about decks. You're going to get a lot of questions about insulation. You're going to get a lot of questions about the coverings themselves. So keep that in mind with regard to your membrane roof systems. Okay, your metal panel and SPF, same kind of thing. You're going to, with SPF, you're going to be talking about decks. You may have a metal deck with an SPF. You may have all different types of decks, right? So there's going to be a lot of questions about decks. There's going to be a lot of questions about your insulation and then the covering the SPF itself. And usually the SPF actually gets a little bit of a membrane on top of it. So there's going to be quite questions about that as well. And your metal panels, that's pretty self-explanatory. Your metal roofs, there's going to be a lot of questions possibly about that as well. And then the decks you can put them on and so forth. Okay, no indexes in these books. Talk about that again in a minute. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about steep slope already. Remember, anything that has to do with a type of material that is designed to shed water. Shingles, asphalt, fiberglass shingles, clay tile, slate roofs, and even maybe some metal panels. What else is designed to shed water? Okay, roll roofing. Okay, all types of stuff in this book but it's for that type of material. And they're going to talk about decks, and they may even talk about insulation. Not so much insulation, but a little bit about decks, because it's mostly going to be wood decks. So they're going to talk about plywood and the different types of plywood and the rating of plywood and so on and so forth. So be aware of that. All right. And then we have the architectural metal flashing and condensation and air leakage control, and that's pretty self-explanatory. It's all about the flashing. Okay, and that's the first part. Then you're going to be talking about this moisture control and air leakage. I don't think you're going to get too many questions about that, but I'll go ahead and explain some of that when we do that particular manual. And then you've got waterproofing. Once again, as a roofer, you may not realize it, but you're expected to know about waterproofing as well. So there's some good information that I'm going to take you through on the waterproofing manual also. Okay, so once again, okay, NRCA manuals. You got your membrane, metal panel, and SPF in the same one, steep slope, and then you've got your flashing, your condensation, and your air control in another one. You've got your water. So you got 5 different NRCA manuals, and they are proud of the very detailed way they're going to take you through and make sure that you do everything perfectly. So this information is going to be way more complicated and intricate than your minimum building code. So kind of keep that in mind. That might help you realize what book you got to go to. And this is the kicker right here. There are no indexes. There's a glossary in the back of the architectural metal flashing book, which is kind of nice to have a glossary and some definitions of something you don't understand, or something that maybe they're just asking you a definition, but there's no indexes. So that's a rough one. So you got to pay attention to these. You got to tab them. You got to highlight them. You got to pay attention to the kind of information that's in each manual. Very, very detailed. Very detailed. NRCA. So there's a list. There's a PDF list of the manuals in the course, in the section of the course in which this video is in. It's this video, the introduction to the reference manuals. Okay, so if you want to go to that PDF and make sure that you've got every manual and what the latest version is and so on and so forth, you can do that. All right, well, I want to say thank you for your business. This is Jack Sheffield, Jack the Exam Guy. Now you do know Jack. Don't let anybody tell you don't know Jack. Call me at any time. There's my number, 904-755-4111 for the 411. Remember to give back. You're going to make a ton of money. Give some money to your church, people that are a little less fortunate than you are, and make the world a better place. Thank you so much. Appreciate you listening. I look forward to doing business with you.